The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hey, hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and we're the She Squatchers. I'm Jen Cruz, your host, and I've got my trusty teammates on the line with me. I've got Jenna Grover.
Hello.
Hi, Jenna. And we've got Tammy Trickle.
I'm back. Hi, everybody.
Yay, she was on vacation.
It was so fun.
It was so fun. All right. I'm so jealous. Well,
The pictures were amazing.
Yes, they were. We've come together tonight with an awesome guest for y'all. We've got Greg Stokes. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Howdy.
Hey, won't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm just surprised, and I know our listeners are going to be surprised as well. Greg Stokes, from where are you from?
A little town called Regalsville, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And what do you do there?
Well, I'm the town's mayor and also the town's chiropractor.
Very awesome. Very awesome. Mayor and chiropractor. Those two things are good together.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you betcha. And you are interested in Bigfoot, right?
For about 40 years now. Yeah, a long time.
What was
Wow.
how did you get interested in Bigfoot?
Well, in our area, back in 1955, we had a pretty bad flood. There was a hurricane came right up the Delaware River. And so the government decided after the flooding that they were going to put in a dam on the river. And the Tox Island Dam project was born. They went in and bulldozed over 200-year-old homes and basically confiscated 30 miles of river bottom and displaced businesses and generational farms. And it was a mess. But in 83, I was dating a lady and I was waiting to go into the military. I was going into the Coast Guard and didn't have a job. So we went up into that area and went camping at the old church camp that I went to as a kid. And we hiked about 1,000 yards down through chest deep thistles to get to the waterfront. You want to be near the river. And we went back again in 1984, and I decided to drive down to the waterfront. And she said, "Don't do that. You're going to get stuck." I said, "No, I'm not. Trust me." Yeah. Well, 5.5 hours of jacking stuff underneath the car. We finally got it loose, and then proceeded to set up our campsite. And we had our fire and our tent, and in front of the fire was about a 40-foot drop straight down to the water. Had some dinner, got everything all cleaned up, put everything in a cooler, got it about 15 feet up in the air because it's bear country up there. You're up in the Pocono Mountains, and settled in for the night. And about 9:45, this was 4th of July weekend, so there was still pretty good sunlight around 9:30. It was starting to get pretty good and dark about 9:45. Something walked up on our campsite and proceeded to walk from the south of our campsite around the firelight to the north of our campsite. And this went on for about an hour. And now, mind you, we're 20 miles from the closest house. There's nothing upstream, nothing downstream. It's all wilderness. And so after about an hour of listening to this, it broke a stick that was big enough that she turned to me and went, "What was that?" I said, "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" Because she knew that I grew up hunting and fishing and camping, and I have been all over the eastern United States, Canada. Spent more nights sitting in tree stands than I really care to recall. But what do you mean you don't know? It's like, well, I don't know. It's been out there about an hour. What do you mean it's been out there? Why didn't you tell me? So I didn't want to scare you. You only need to see the movie Deliverance one time to know we could have been in real big trouble. And I was sitting with a fillet knife under one leg and a hatchet under the other. And, my heart was trying to choke me to death right through my nose. So after about an hour, we went and lay down, and I laid down on top of my sleeping bag. I didn't figure that a millimeter of nylon was going to protect us from anything that was outside walking around our campsite. About 5-10 minutes after we laid down, this thing let out the scream from hell. It was whatever did this was close enough to us that you could actually hear the lips pop open. And there was a very, very deep guttural tone to this scream, but at the same time, there was a very, very high pitched aspect of the scream. And the thing that really sticks out in my mind, even to this day, and this happened in '84, was the resonance that this thing had. We both sat bolt upright in the tent, and she said to me, "What the hell is that?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'm not staying in here." It was definitely territorial. It was definitely directed at us. And the scream was so loud and vibrated my body in such a resonance that I literally could not see the inside of the tent. It was like looking through shimmering water. So I went out and stood with my back at the fire. There was no light pollution in that valley, and I owned like a $1.99 Kmart special flashlight back then. I was just starting out in life, and it wouldn't have lit up anything much more than 5 feet away from me anyway. So I'm standing there looking at inky blackness and figured what its problem was the fire. So I grabbed a bunch of firewood and stoked it up real big, and then went back in and laid down. Didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night. In the morning, got up, and I looked around for probably about 45 minutes, an hour, to try and find something to tell me what this was. There had been a drought that summer. It was very, very dry, and you could see where something went through the bushes, but there was no discernible footprints or anything like that. And I have literally laid awake hundreds and hundreds of nights and replayed that evening through my mind. I can tell you that I have never said that what we heard was a Bigfoot, even though I'm 99.9% sure that's exactly what we heard. I can tell you with 100% certainty all the animals in North America that I know that it wasn't. I've heard wolves in the wild. I've heard bobcats in the wild. I know all the sounds that foxes make, bears. There's really not much that I haven't heard. I've been in the woods all my life. And just, people have tried to tell me that, well, it was a bear. So, well, bears don't walk on 2 feet very much, and they certainly don't break sticks. I've seen 300-pound bears go through the woods, and they don't make any sound while they're doing it. For as big an animal as it is, it's pretty amazing what they can do to slip quietly through the woods. So that led to an unhealthy number of hours on the internet and talking to people. I've met within a 20-mile radius of where we had our encounter. I've met 8 or 9 people who have seen at least one. I know a fellow who almost had a family of 3. They ran right in front of his truck. So the closest was a friend of mine. I have a patient who's into Bigfoot just as much as I am. She says, "You got to go up and talk to this guy, John, up in Easton. He runs a ceramic shop up there." So went in and I told him my story, and he turned and told me his. 1973, just south of Stroudsburg. He was living in a cabin about 2 miles off the main road. Heard some rattling around in his garbage cans and went out. And he said, "Well, there I am, all 6'4" of me, looking up at all 9 foot of him." I said, "What?" He said, "Sasquatch." I said, "How far away were you?" He said, "I could have touched him." I asked him what it smelled like, and he said, "It smelled like a dumpster after a 95-degree week with a dead deer in it. And if you rolled a wet dog in it, that would be about how bad it smelled." I said, "What did it do?" He said, "Just looked down at me with this big sad look on his face and walked away." He says, "That's what upset me. I would have fed him. He was just hungry rooting around in my garbage cans." "You ever see him again?" "No." And I asked him if there was any tracks in the yard. Now, John was a descendant of a Lenape chief. So he was Native American. And he didn't want anybody up there messing around with it. So he said there was beautiful trackway, but he raked it all up in the morning because he didn't want anybody coming up there and disturbing him. So, but that's how it got started. And, I've been asking questions and talking to people and doing research ever since. I've talked to people from America. I've talked to people from Tibet. I've done some research about the things that went on over in Russia. I have a gas station near me that's run by a bunch of Tibetans, and in New Jersey they pump your gas for you. And there was the guy was standing next to my truck, and I said, you from Tibet? Yep. It's like, you up in the mountains? The whole country's up in the mountains. Said, you ever seen a Yeti? And he didn't know that word. So I pulled up a picture on my phone, and he looked at it, and right away he said, Meta, MEH-TEH. He said, that's what they call them over there. And depending on where you are in the Himalayas, they have a couple of words for it, but Meta is the most common. I've met people from Pakistan use the same word too. He told me that his grandmother was herding a yak down one of the mountain passes down a trail, and the Meta come off the mountain, rip the throat out of the yak, and then threw the yak up over its shoulder and walked back up the mountain with it. Now, this guy wasn't trying to get his 15 minutes of fame on CNN. He just told me very matter of factly, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened. So, and sometimes people who live in town or live in cities, never been, in the woods, they get real skeptical about what I'm talking about, and that's okay. I just tell them, look, you weren't laying in the tent with me. I've never been scared in the woods. I've been startled. I've had grouse blow out next to my head. I've had deer jump up right next to me that I didn't see. I've had rabbits blow out between my feet while I was hunting. And yeah, you go, oh, and it scares you for a minute, and you giggle about it, but you're not scared. It's just you're startled. That night, I was terrified, straight up. Not afraid to tell you, I thought we were going to die. And so it changes how you look at the woods. It changes your perception of, what's out there. And I'd like to see one, studied wholeheartedly. I mean, I've looked at the Patterson-Gimlin film. You're familiar with that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from the standpoint of biomechanics and anatomy and physiology, there is no possible way that's a fake. There's too many things that line up. So there's things in your body that measure out. If you take your hands and put them out straight out from your side, from fingertip to fingertip, that's pretty close to how tall you're going to be. From the crease of your wrist to your elbow, that's how long your leg is. You look at yourself without any clothes on, the distance from the bottom of the armpit to the crest of the hip, 50% is where the breast will hang. Now, your breast line runs straight down from the mid-clavicular line. So if you divide your clavicle in half and come straight down, that's where the breasts hang. Now, if you were going to go through all the trouble of making a monkey suit, well, first off, why would you make it a female monkey suit? And two, how would you know, being a rodeo clown, a rodeo promoter, that, biomechanically, this is where everything should be? No. So there's also a spot in the film, I think it's frame number 243. I could be wrong on the number, but there's a point where Patty looks at the camera, and as her leg comes down, there's a bulge that develops underneath her thigh. Well, what she's done is she's torn the lateral aspect of the quadricep. The muscle's called the vastus lateralis. And, in humans, they'll open up your knee, reach up and pull the tendon back down and fasten it back down to the shin where it belongs. But that animal isn't capable of having something like that done. So now, when Patterson-Gimlin shot that film, they took it to Disney. And Disney straight up said, well, if that's a fake, it's an absolute masterpiece, because we can't make a suit do what's in that film. And in 72, when they had the Planet of the Apes movies, they first said the same thing, but then they said that, well, they had made that suit. And later on, that producer admitted that was a lie, that he just said that so that they could promote the movie and make more money. So that film has been looked at more than the Zapruder film, the film of Kennedy being shot to death. And it's never been able to be disproven. There's been all kinds of experiments have been done to try and show that was faked, and the reality of it all is there's no way that's a fake. It's a 100% legitimate movie. So, You have questions?
We always have questions.
Good.
So I know you said that anatomically the patty film just fits. Like, could you give us some examples? Like, is it the trapezius, the suboccipital ridge, or I mean, what are the specifics that you're noticing that are really significant?
Well, you can see, and Dr. Meldrum has talked about all this. You can see the traps. You can see the definition in the calf. You can see the way that she brings her foot up off the ground. Dr. Meldrum is the one who discovered that they have the mid-tarsal break. When our foot hits the ground, it's heel strike, and then as the foot levels off, our whole foot locks up into one main beam, and that's what allows you to spring off your foot. And when your foot comes off the ground, then that's toe off. Well, he's the one who figured out through study that they have what's called a mid-tarsal break. So the middle of their foot actually bends to 90 degrees. And if you look at legitimate footprints that have been casted or photographed, you can see that ridge that develops right in the middle of the foot. If you took a human being and projected them up to 9 feet tall and 900 pounds, their first step, they'd break their leg. Their pelvis and their legs are not the same as ours. The length of their arms are not the same as ours. But
So that's also helping their speed then too. Could
oh,
that be?
I talked to somebody who said that they were on safari in Africa and they saw a cheetah run down a gazelle. And they also saw a Bigfoot run down a deer. And he said the Bigfoot was faster than the cheetah. So, when you talk about an average 7.5 to 8 foot stride length, you're covering twice as much ground as what we can cover. So near us, I don't live too far from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, capital of Pennsylvania. And they have a big farm show complex out there. It's acres and acres and acres of area where they have the farm show. Well, they also have the Greater Eastern Outdoor Show there. And so I go there, and if I think that the outfitter has Bigfoot in their area, I ask them about it. And I get some mixed reactions, but every year I get one or two good stories. And the one was from Manitoba. It was a father and son team that did guiding for white-tailed deer. And I talked to them briefly about their outfitting service and what they did. And then I asked him, I said, "You got any Bigfoot up in your area?" And the kid looked at his dad and says, "Should we tell him?" And I said to him, "Yeah, you should tell me what happened." So here they had taken a couple of brothers. They were repeat clients, have been with them for quite a while. And they took the one fellow and dropped them off in the morning. And then they went off to a different farm, excuse me, and spent the day there. Well, in the evening, when they came back to pick up the first guy, he was not real happy. And he was taking it out on the guide. And his brother finally said to him, "What's your problem?" He says, "Oh, you guys think you're funny." So, "What are you talking about? You guys think you're funny? What are you talking about?" "Well, you drop me off, and first thing in the morning, you run by my stand with a great big monkey suit, and I didn't see a deer all day long." So he said they were 4 miles away at a different farm. They never left each other's side. So they went back and they measured it out. The footprints were 18 inches long, 8 inches across, and they had a 7.5 foot stride length. And this was through snow. So it wasn't like, and it was all fresh tracks. And I don't know why they didn't take pictures of it. I would have loved to seen that. But I asked them if they rebooked their hunt, and they said no, they wouldn't come back. So, and well, you know, like as I said, it changed you, and they might not have want. It took me 30 years to go back to the area we were in. It took me a long time to go back up there. I didn't want anything to do with seeing one or being screamed at by another one. That was not anything that interested me, even though I've been reading everything I could find. I've read at least a dozen books about it and talked to people from all over, from all walks of life. You know, not everybody's the average idiot, the town moron. You know, some of these people were military people and cops and doctors and lawyers, and you know, and genuine encounters. There was an encounter that happened not real far from my office. I volunteer for the local rec board, and I was down working on the baseball field. Guy come walking up to me and asked me about my tractor, and we got talking. He told me he was new to the area and that he had just moved there from Washington. And I said, "You have any Bigfoot stories from up that way?" And he just looked at the ground. I don't want to talk about it. Now you can't tease me like that. Okay, if you've seen one, I want to hear about it. And he said, "Seriously, you want to know about this?" I said, "Absolutely, I do." So he told me that he had been hiking locally, and there's a big swamp where this guy was, and he heard rocks clacking. So he clacked back, and they went back and forth like this for about an hour, and he had to leave. He had to go home. So he went back there a few days later and was walking down the same trail, and the Bigfoot stepped out 30 feet from him. And I said, "What did he do?" And he said he just kind of woofed at him and kind of stepped towards him, and he backed up real slow and then just walked away. And this gentleman had giant goose pimples on his arm while he was trying to tell me this, and he was visibly shaken up. He was upset. So the best actors in the world couldn't produce that kind of reaction. So I've
That's
talked.
true.
I talked to another guy out at the Sportsman Show. He was down in Florida. He had a turkey hunting and deer hunting operation. And I said to him, "You ever seen one of those skunk apes?" The guy backed up to the back of his booth and stood there looking at me. And so I said, "Listen, I understand your reaction. There's people that, you have pretty strong opinions about, the fact that they don't believe in this animal. Well, I don't believe in this animal either. I know that it exists. There's no doubt in my mind. I've met too many people that have seen one. Met too many people that have had encounters with them. I'm one of the heads of the Bucks County Bigfoot Project. The Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project is run by a group that Mary Fabian is the lady's name. She runs the statewide group, and through them, I've met literally dozens of people that have seen one right here in Pennsylvania. You have to remember, people, they've grown up in town, they've grown up in cities. And most average hunters have never even gone more than 500 or 600 yards off the road. But there's places here in Pennsylvania where you can get a mile or two back real easily. We have a swamp near us that's 14,000 acres. It was carved out by the ice when it was leaving after the last ice age. And there's places in there that the woods are so thick, you could stand 15 feet from me with a road flare in your hand. You wouldn't be able to see me. It's just that miserably thick. And I'm getting too old. I'm going to be 61 next month. I'm getting too old to hunt those kind of places. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Oh
well,
my gosh, 61.
yes, ma'am.
You
But it's
shouldn't be on this station. Get him off. No,
oh,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm teasing.
Oh, now he just is quiet.
Is that cognac? Well, he was sipping. He was.
oh, that's some peanut butter bourbons. Real nice. So,
Oh, okay.
I didn't
um,
know there was such a thing.
I know a lady in that swamp. She was hunting a mile and a half back, and she was right at the edge of the swamp. She heard all this slopping around in there, and she thought there was bear coming out. No, the Sasquatch walked out and stood 80 feet from her. So she, after it walked back in, and it was only there for a second or two, and turned around, walked back in the swamp. She called her boyfriend on the radio. "Hey, you need to come over here." And he was like, "Well, it's time to get going. It's where that," and I hunted right where she was. It's a mile and a half to the road. And it's a long hike to get back out of there because you have to go up this series of benches. So you're walking level, then you're going up, then you're walking level, and you're going up until you work your way up out of that swamp. And he was like, "Come on out. Well, it's time to get going." And she's like, "I'm not getting down out of stand until you get over here. Now come over here." Now she didn't want to announce on the radio what she had heard. So he goes over, "What's up?" And she told him what happened. And I said, "How big was this?" And he said, "That was exactly what I asked her." She said, "Look at the branch that's over top of your head. It was 9 feet off the ground. Its head was even with that." So, and then I talked to him about this, and he said he had had several encounters with them where he could hear them, but it was so thick that he couldn't see them. And he had one that beat its chest at him, which that got real interesting real quick. So what did you do? I just backed up. He said he backed out of there. So the Route 209 runs from right up to the edge of New York in the northern part of Pennsylvania, where Route 84 crosses. And that was the valley that was going to be flooded by the Tox Island Dam project. And for 30 miles, once you leave the town of Milford, you come down through that valley. There's nothing in that valley. There's no homes. There's no businesses. There's no light pollution. There's no nothing. And I had put my encounter on one of the Bigfoot sites, and this fellow responded to me. He said, I know exactly where you are. I used to do the run from Allentown, Pennsylvania to Connecticut twice, 2-3 times a week. And I came down through that valley at very early in the morning, usually about 3:30 in the morning. And he said that he almost hit a family of 3 of them. They ran out in front of him. He said the baby was about 5 foot tall, mom was 7 foot tall, and daddy was 9 foot tall and growling at him. He was showing his teeth at him. He said, I'm sure that he was screaming at me, but the radio was up and the pickup truck that he was in was stood on its nose, and he was more worried about not hitting him than listening to what was going on. He said he had a place that he used to stop to go to the bathroom about a half mile down the road. He said, not after that. He wasn't going to stop anywhere near there. But, and again, people like this are, very forthright and straightforward and, telling you an honest encounter. And you can see the interest and the fear in their eyes. Back to this guy out at the Sportsman show, I told him, I said, listen, I'm not here to give you a hard time. If you've seen one, I want to hear about it. So he walks up. He says, yeah, I saw one. I was taking the party out turkey hunting. We were 4:30 in the morning driving down a backcountry road in the middle of Florida. And you got to remember, too, people think of Florida as Disney World. Well, the thing is, once you get above Tampa and you go all the way around to the other side of the country, the whole bottom of our country is one great big giant swamp for miles and miles and miles and miles and more miles. It's just swampland. And so something like this can live in there without any trouble at all. But he said the thing jumped up next to the road and ran out across in front of the truck. I said, how big was it? He said, well, I was in an F-250 pickup truck. I had to look up to see its head. I said, how many steps did it take to get across the road? And I know what the common answer is. And he gave it to me, 2. Well, when you're running 7.5 feet, 8 feet at a shot, it doesn't take real long to get across the road. I said, you ever seen a bear? And he was like, oh, I've shot bears. I know what bears look like. This wasn't a bear. No, I was more looking for a reference of size. I said, what do you think it weighed? He said, 800-900 pounds easily, without any trouble. One last question. You boys go hunting that morning? I said, nope. So we went into town, sat and drank coffee. Nobody wanted to get out of the truck. So, but I've collected several stories out of Florida, some out of Montana, a couple out of Oregon, California. We were out to California. We went up to Humboldt County, went up to the Avenue of the Giants. And there's a fellow up there who's got he deals all in redwood. And he goes in and, some of these old stumps still have thousands of board feet of wood in them, and he cuts them out and, does all kinds of decorative stuff with them. And so I asked him, I says, you got any Bigfoot in your area? You ever seen one of those? And he said, in 2004, his dogs were acting up for quite a while. And he had gone out in the morning, and the driveway that we had just driven down, there was a trackway that came right up the walk, or right up the driveway. And so he called the local park ranger who he had grown up with. And he came over. He said, well, we're not here to find Bigfoot, but if it's any consolation to you, we've had 80 people into the ranger station this week alone to give us reports that they had seen him. And 2 of them were California gas and light guys. They saw 2 of them next to the road wrestling with each other.
80
people
reports
in 1 week.
Wow.
In 1
And
week. So,
the one sighting was them wrestling with each other.
well, they're territorial like any other animal. You're going to fight over food. You're going to fight over a mate. So that's probably what was happening.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds like a good place to take our commercial break. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with Greg Stokes.
That was a quick half hour.
It goes by quick, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling confident for the last half?
Oh, no problem at all.
Good
I
deal.
I could talk about this all day long.
I love
You
it.
sound great. You sound fabulous. I love hearing you talk. You speak very well, and you are full of knowledge, and I just love that. That's awesome.
I love it too. Although we should reposition your camera. If you could talk, you could be in. There you go. If you could talk. Keep talking.
Okay. Where do you want?
Well, I have to have you talking so you show up in the floating window so I can see how it's showing up.
How's that? Better there or better there? Better there?
I can see the top of your head and your nose. There. Whoa, too much.
There.
There. That's good. That's good right there. Awesome. Awesome.
Oh, I guess that's not the way I want to do it tonight. It's just a mess. There's not any product in it right now. Sorry, guys.
You worry too much.
Hey, thanks for saying it. I was looking at her hair going, that looks pretty good for not doing anything to it.
Are you
Nice and
serious?
shiny, Jenna.
Thanks. I'm never going to put product in it again. No, I'm just kidding. I will. I'll use it.
Guys,
I know,
what kind
you're
of products do you use, Greg?
Shaving cream. Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
I waking up as a child and 20-year-old kid, and I had a small furry animal growing on my pillow. Asked my mom about it because I never knew my grandfather, and he's like, "Oh, he didn't have a hair on his head." It's like, great.
Oh, no.
It's okay. Listen, all men are born with the same amount of hormones. If they choose to make hair with theirs, it's their problem.
I say only men with extremely sexy heads go bald.
That a girl.
There you
Welcome
go.
back to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and we're the She Squatchers. Won't you check us out online? We are at shesquatchers.com. There you can click on our events page and see where we're going to be coming up. I'm going to tell you very sad news. Our September event got canceled due to scheduling problems. And our next event is now in October. We'll be in Yakima. For the Yakima Valley Bigfoot Con, and that's going to be super, super fun. So if you're out in the state of Washington in Toppenish, that's where Bob Gimlin, the legend, lives. He's going to be there. Come out and hang with us and the man himself. So I'm just going to say that for now. We've got lots of other things going on as well. We've got a whole bunch of stuff in the works for the spring. So I'm excited to find out the details so we can share that with you. And if you're an event coordinator out there, we're available. Send me a message. We'll talk. Because it's a lot of fun to come out and cross the country and share the things that we found on our travels. So much fun. And we're back to our show with Greg Stokes. But before I do that, I got to tell you, because Tammy will kick my butt if I don't, that we are on Instagram and Facebook. Please come follow us there and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please, please, please come subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. There's lots of goodies on there. So back to Greg Stokes. Hi, Greg, from Pennsylvania. He's got lots to share with us tonight. You were telling us stories. I can't wait to hear more.
Well, you mentioned Washington. I had a patient that moved out that way to follow her husband, who was in the Navy. And she was out there for a while, about 9 months or so. And she came back to the office. And when she came in, I asked her, I said, so you got to have a good Bigfoot story to tell me. Well, her eyes got huge. And she told me she was out visiting some friends at night having dinner. And the friends had a cattle corral right behind the house. And the cattle had just erupted, bellowing and making all kinds of noise. And they had a very, very powerful, great big spotlight that they went out back with. And they lit it up, and the Bigfoot was in with the cattle. And she said the craziest thing about it was when it turned to leave, it stepped over the fence. It didn't have to jump. It didn't have to run. It just stepped over the fence and walked back into the woods like, it was no problem at all. She said it was just impressive. It didn't have to hop. It didn't have to jump. It stepped over it and disappeared. So I met an outfitter in Oregon who was 10 miles back They set up their camp and had a bunch of rocks and stuff thrown at them. He thought it was just somebody messing with him. And he got to thinking, it's like, there's nobody back here. We're 10 miles from the closest road. And, sometimes when you tell stories, and I've got literally thousands of stories I can tell you, an hour's not even close to being long enough. People get skeptical. And then I start asking them questions. Like, you know what an orangutan is? Yep. You know what a chimpanzee is? Yep. Okay. So how long were gorillas known before they actually killed one and took it into London? There was explorers going into Africa for 250 years talking about these great apes that were in there, and people didn't believe them until they finally took one in. Then I asked them, how many primates have been discovered in the last 10 years? There's been 150 primates discovered in the last 10 years. Some of them are only several inches tall, but there's been a lot. And this idea that we know everything biologically and zoologically of the earth, come on, that's not even close to being true. So then I ask them, do you know what a bonobo is? And most of them don't. And bonobos are a great ape that live in the Congo. They're 99% genetically like you and I. There's very little difference between them and us. Chimpanzees are 98% like you and I. And the difference between chimpanzees and bonobos is chimpanzees are run, they're a patriarchal society. You have one big dominant male that runs all the troop. He's the one who gets to do all the mating. And what'll happen eventually is some young guy will come along and knock him off. Well, now he's only got a certain amount of time at the top. So he wants to get his genes passed along. The only way to do that is they have to go through and they kill all the little ones. So they commit infanticide. It's the only way mama's going to come into heat and he's going to get the chance to breed. Bonobos don't do that. Bonobos breed with everybody. And anytime there's stress in the troop, they just all have fun together. And the other thing that they do, so they don't commit infanticide. Whose baby is that? Well, it could be any one of ours. The other thing that happens too is bonobos are matriarchal society. So it's the girls that are running the show. And when chimpanzees get together and run into another troop, they'll fight to the death over the territory. For bonobos, they will, scream and carry on, and it's all the males that are doing this, and the girls just get together and start preening. And eventually the boys look up, it's like, oh, they're not even watching. And then it stops. And so they intermix with their territories. It's no big deal.
So it's like the bar.
A little bit, yeah. Depends on where you're going. Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
So they weren't discovered until the 50s. Okay, so 1950s. So they're fairly recent. So then I asked them, do you know what a billy ape is? And most people don't know what that is. Billy apes are about a 400-pound chimpanzee, and they were found about 4 or 5 years ago, real recently. So, and that's in the Congo. So then I asked this question: what's got more wilderness, North America or Africa? And the answer is North America. North America is still 38% wilderness. So, and Pennsylvania is still 71% woods. We have a farm in the town of Wind Gap, and you can run woods from our farm all the way to the tundra. You could run all the way up, except for crossing roads. And folks forget just how much wilderness there is out there. Then I asked them, about the plains buffalo, right? Plains bison. Sure, it's buffalo, right? Right. Did you know there's another species of buffalo in North America, different species of bison? They're called the woods bison. They were thought to have been shot off years and years and years ago. And there was a bush pilot that was flying, I believe it was up in the Northwest Territory of Canada, flew over a herd of 400 of them. So now if a herd of buffalo, big, dumb, stupid buffalo can hide from man, in that kind of numbers, how hard is it going to be for an animal that's actually smart, doesn't want anything to do with you? You shoot at it every time it sees you, and it knows that. How hard is it going to be for him to get away? And you got to understand something too. They're living in forest and dense woods, and just like you when you grew up, you knew your neighborhood like the back of your hand. You knew which dog you had to avoid, which gate you could go through, which old man was going to yell up at you for being on his grass. Well, they're playing for real. And so they don't want anything to do with you because humans bring trouble to most everything in nature. And so they don't want any problems like that. So skepticism's good, until we've got a body to study. But I can tell you this. I was recently in the Pentagon. I had a cousin who got promoted from um, major to lieutenant colonel. Pinning ceremony was on the inner ring of the Pentagon, and then he gave us a nickel tour of the Pentagon. We got to see where the plane came in and Saddam Hussein's gold-plated AK-47. It was a pretty interesting tour. You know what they have in the Pentagon? They have an Office of Bigfoot Research and Sightings.
What?
Absolutely. I saw the sign myself. Couldn't take a picture of it. They would have taken my phone from me.
Oh my gosh.
Now, if the government is that interested in it, why does the Center of our Defense have something like that? Yep.
This is really interesting to know. Thank you very much for telling this. This is cool.
Public doesn't want you to know about a lot of things, and that's Bigfoot's one of them. I know.
Why?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions why, and that's a time for a whole nother show. But I can tell you this: I know of a couple different cases where they've gone in the forest fires that we had a few years back that were so bad. They went in and took bodies out, and they also had one that was alive. The firefighters were assisting it; it was injured, and the government came in and took it out of there. Where they took it and why they took it, and what they want to do with it, I can't answer that. But I do know these cases. I also know I talked to a fellow online, and he worked in a commune in Northern California in the 70s. And they worked up in Oregon quite a bit as contract loggers. They would go in and they would take out the smaller trees before they would come in and clear cut the old growth forest. And they would just punch a hole back up into the mountains and do what they need to do. And then once they were done logging, they would back out. So they're up on the mountainside. They're eating their lunch about 11:30 in the morning. And the mules there having her lunch, and they had just dropped this big oak tree. There was a bunch of deer that come up and started feeding on the top of the tree. And everything's all peaceful and quiet. And all of a sudden, the deer picked their heads up and took off running. And then the mule jumped up and ran down the mountain and dove into the back of the truck. Then this big bellowing roar came from the mountainside. And they took off running and jumped into the truck. They said they went about 3-4 miles down the road before they decided to secure the mule. They got back to their base camp. Their boss was like, "Hey, you left thousands of dollars of equipment up there. You go up there and get it. You're not leaving it sit on the mountain." So they went and got their stuff, brought it back, called it a day. Well, the next day that they went to work, they were met by 2 Oregon State troopers and a park ranger, and they got separated. And they asked them, what had happened, everything that went on, and then came back together. And the cops got all ticked off and left. They turned and looked at the park rangers, and the park rangers, he said, what's going on? And the park ranger said, "You know what's going on. They know what's going on. You just forget about what's going on." Well, here, all the logging trucks had the doors ripped off the hinges, had the hoods ripped off the hinges. All the wires were all tore up. There was 300-400-pound boulders smacked against the side of it. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage done. And there's no way that a human being could have done that. They're, way the heck back in the mountains. You would have taken equipment to do that. What's strong enough to rip a door off its hinge? Yeah. So, but I've been privileged to a lot of interesting conversations that people have shared with me because I am so open about it. I don't worry about what people think of me. I really don't care what you think. You weren't laying in a tent with me. And when you take that kind of attitude where you're not worried about, and my town council knows what my attitude towards Bigfoot is. Half the people in town are patients of mine. They all know I've got Bigfoot stuff all over my office. Yeah, and there's people that are skeptical, and that's okay. There's people tell you straight up they don't believe in it, and that's okay. Again, they haven't done the research that I've done. They haven't read what I've read. They haven't talked to the people that I've talked to. So I'm going to keep on researching and keep looking until somebody finally comes up with one and we get some answers. But it's an interesting subject matter. I tell people be very careful about looking around the internet, because you can get sucked in and be sitting there until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and have your wife yelling at you. What are you doing?
I've had that happen to me where I'm just up all night and I don't even know it's morning now. I start hearing the birds. I'm like,
I,
no,
I want to keep going.
right? No, I didn't sleep. I didn't get any time for rest for my workday. Right? Right? Yeah, for sure. We do have a question in the chat room. Sherry is wondering about Bigfoot. Do you think he is a physical, interdimensional, paranormal? Are there any aspects of those things that are ringing true for you?
That's a really great question. Now, the story that I just told about the loggers, that fellow recounted that he had told this story to one of his bandmates. He was in an AC/DC cover band, and one of his bandmates started laughing. It was a drummer. And he said, "Oh, you're laughing at me." "No, I'm laughing with you. I worked for NASA for 30 years. NASA has as big a budget for Bigfoot as what they have for going to Mars. And it's because they think it can do interdimensional stuff." Now, I have a friend of mine that lives down in Florida, and he and his buddy saw one of these skunk apes standing in an open field, and it was only ankle deep grass. So I had somebody tell me, "Oh, it just dropped down and crawled away." No, they were looking straight at it, and it disappeared straight in front of their eyes at 100 yards.
That's
Um,
not the first time we've heard that. It seems to be more and more common that this is happening. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's quite right. That's what people are describing. I've also read encounters of police officers who were chasing after suspects, and they just disappeared right in front of their eyes. So I don't know what's going on with that. But that's a great question about the interdimensional stuff. And I know that I've talked to park rangers that wouldn't talk to me about it. The government's pretty tight-lipped about what's going on. Um, I have a feeling that they take a lot of this stuff to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. That's what my research has shown me. They hide a lot of stuff there. But there's a lot of theories. There's one theory that came out of a physical anthropologist that came up with a bunch of teeth for an animal called Gigantopithecus blacki. They were a great ape that was known to have lived about 300,000 years ago in China and parts of India, Pakistan, Vietnam. You talk to the guys that were over in Vietnam, they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, we had rock apes throw rocks at." That's why they call them rock apes, because they threw rocks at them. And these were not gorillas. They weren't chimps. They were some form of very, very large ape. And so Gigantopithecus blacki was known to have lived up to 300,000 years ago. So what's to say that they didn't come across the land bridge? What's to say that some of them didn't survive? There's a lot of things that were thought to have disappeared. That the coelacanth being one of them. It's a fish that was caught off of the coast of Madagascar. They were thought to have been extinct for thousands of years, and the locals were like, "We catch them all the time. They're delicious, and they're an ancient form of fish." So there's a lot of stuff out there we don't know, but the interdimensional stuff is very, very interesting. I talked to an outfitter from Montana that was telling me he was watching some elk, and the elk were alerted. They were looking. The hunters were looking at the elk, but the elk were looking further up the valley. And they said, if you've ever seen the movie The Predator, it was just like shimmering light that went across the valley, and they took off running. Now, what that was, I don't know. I don't claim to have all the answers at all. But they think that possibly that Bigfoot can do some sort of cloaking, some sort of disappearing act, and that's why the government's so interested in it and so tight-lipped about it. So, again, I don't know. I don't have any experience with that. I can only tell you what happened to me. So, but that's a
Well,
great, really is.
I thank you for telling us what you've been through. Oh my gosh. It's exciting to know that you've worked for NASA. And in
No,
Texas?
it wasn't me. It was somebody who was being told the story about the guys being up in Oregon.
Oh,
Um,
I'm so sorry. I thought you said you worked for NASA. I was gonna say, you're a machine, man. You're so
Yeah.
cool.
I'm not that smart. So I talked to the park ranger who in the area where um, we had our encounter, and I told him what happened. And I asked him, I said, did you or any of your colleagues ever see or hear one of these things? Wouldn't answer me. He didn't say a word. And I said to him, I said, oh, yeah, I was in the military. I know what it's like to have orders. It sounds like you or one of your colleagues saw or heard one of these, and you got it from the higher ups to keep your mouth shut. He just smiled this big smile and drove away. I should have stopped him and handed my card and said, look, when you're retired, you can actually talk about this. I'd like to hear what happened. So the area where that is, the road into there is closed in the wintertime. They don't maintain it. So there's hundreds and thousands of acres that are not accessible by car. So, it's a perfect place for something like that to live. And again, it's all thick, dense woods. It's, real quiet in there. Any other questions?
So what about, have you ever had reports or seen the balls of light that people sometimes report alongside of Bigfoot sightings?
So there's a pretty famous story that happened here in Pennsylvania up near Lake Erie. There were some people that this happened back in the 60s. There was two couples that were fooling around in the car and outside the car and just being young kids, and UFO went over top of this, like you say, a big ball light, and kind of hovered over the hillside that was next to them. And 5 minutes later, there was a Bigfoot standing next to them. So again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't answer for them or what they described, but there are some stories of people seeing things, and again, I've talked to several different people who have said that they just disappeared right in front of them. I did talk to a fellow from Florida who was out hog hunting, um, and he was tying up the hog, and the dogs had it bayed, and the Bigfoot reached out from underneath the palmetto bushes and started pulling the hog towards him. And he grabbed the big stick that was there and hit him across the shoulder. He said this thing let go with this big bellowing roar and then took off. And he said he sicked his dogs on it. He said it easily outran his dogs with no trouble at all. So, and that's through Florida swampland.
I'm surprised the dogs went after it like that. Usually, because I would assume, since so many other animals are suddenly just becoming extremely silent and going, you know,
Yeah,
I just
bloodhounds are a real different breed of dog. They're trained to fight with hogs, and they're bred for absolute toughness. They're definitely a different. My son has one. They're definitely a different breed of dog. They're really something else. So, but I have a guy that I've been talking to that's up in the northwestern corner of Lehigh County, which is up in the Appalachian Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And he came home one night. The dogs took off down through the back of the property, and he heard all this hooting and hollering and carrying on and growling, and dogs come running back up through the yard, went barreling into the house with their tails between their legs. And he went down there the next morning, and he found a deer. And the deer, it looked like somebody had just taken a knife and sliced it along the rib cage and snapped the spine off from inside and ripped the back legs off this animal. Right. And, mountain lions don't do that. And bears don't do that in wintertime, so there was no bears. But and there was footprints there. And so he's been hearing it and seeing it and calling to it ever since. So I have a very dear friend of mine who's a huge outdoorsman and was up in the Poconos and got deep into some hemlock bushes, trees, a long ways from the road, and he came up on a dead doe that was laying in the snow. Now, the weird thing about this was you could see where the coyotes had come up to the deer and walked around it, but they had not fed on it. And the other really strange thing was, most carnivores, most scavengers will feed from the back end of a deer. It's where the most fat is. It's where the most meat is. And that's not how this deer was opened up. He said it looked like somebody taking a knife and going down the shoulder and down the flank and down the back of the spine, and then just peeled the skin down to the belly and then fed from the back down. Now, I have read of an encounter that happened in Western Pennsylvania where the guy came up over a hill and the Bigfoot had a deer there, and he watched the deer get opened up exactly like how I just described that deer was opened up. So that was pretty strange. And then he started looking at the tree that it was laying under, and every branch from 2 feet off the ground to 9 feet off the ground, some as big around as my forearm, were just snapped off. There was no claw marks on the tree. It was not like a bear had done this. And then he got this overwhelming feeling that there was something watching him, and he had to leave. He had to get out of there. He couldn't stay there. I asked him, "Were you armed?" He said, "No." "What the hell are you doing 1.5 miles off the road without a pistol?" Like, I could have cracked him one. He knows better. But there's some interesting stuff that's happened out there. There's definitely some interesting things, and there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. It's good stuff.
Very
It
interesting.
is very good stuff.
I love
So-
these stories, especially the stuff we've never heard before, like those agencies and the budget. And go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, I was just going to ask you. So I know Jen was asking some of your thoughts on Bigfoot. I was just wondering about, do you think that it is a physical being? I mean, what are your thoughts on physical versus
Metaphysical or
metaphysical? Thank you.
well, again, until they can actually have good clear footage or somebody actually sees one do it, where it's public, or they actually capture one and are able to study it. There's a group down in Texas. They're called the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. They've made no bones about it. They're going to kill one, and they've hunted. Yeah, I know. It's not good, but they've been run through kangaroo courts, and they've looked on public property, and they've been arrested for nothing. They've been run through kangaroo courts and basically told that you're going to stop doing what you're doing. It's like, okay, so why are you so against that? Why is it that people have hit them with cars in Florida and the cops are insistent that you hit a bear when they know damn well it wasn't a bear? It's not what happened. So I know several cases like that.
Did you mention, I'm sorry to interrupt, did you mention do you think they're intelligent?
Oh, there's no doubt about that in my mind.
Okay, so you believe that they're living in groups, or what do you believe on that?
Well, they have to be to some extent. I mean, there's been sightings in every state in the country except for Hawaii. In John Green's book, Sasquatch the Apes Among Us, he talks about the 22 inches of rain. And he collected 12 or 1,300 stories back when, it was all done by hand. There was no internet. There was no Skype. There was no center talking like this. He collected all these stories by hand, and the people that he talked to were pretty forthright about what they were saying. The one lady he talked to was up in Idaho, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you knew not to put the cattle up in the high country pastures in June and July because a big hairy man just come and take them." So I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question? I just went
no,
off
that's
direction.
I should never have interrupted you. Sorry, it's my
it's quite right. Yeah,
problem with
we're actually coming to the end of the show, you guys. So we are out of time. We are gonna have to ask Greg to come back and join us another time if he would please be willing to do so at a later date. We would love to hear more. Yes. He's not. Oh, good.
Wonderful. Yay.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. And hey, we're the She Squatchers. Come subscribe to our YouTube channel. And good night, everyone.
Bye.